democracy, freedom, honor. The men and women of the United States military put their lives on the line to protect these values. But how are they treated when they return home? We'll be talking with United States Congressman John Mica about the beleaguered Veterans Affairs Administration. We'll also talk with Dr. Minette Monroe about an innovative equestrian therapy program for veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder. Two Central Floridians talk about addressing life-altering challenges that face our veterans when they come home. Next on Metro Center Outlook. Hello, I'm Diane Trees. The Department of Veterans Affairs has promised sweeping changes. What's happening nationally and in Central Florida to ensure timely and improved access to quality health care for our veterans? Joining us today is United States Congressman John Mica. Congressman Mica, welcome to the show.
Well, good to be back with you, Diane, and also be part of a program that talks about our veterans' care.
Let's start with some of the controversy that's happened. The VA has been described as a chronic systems failure, even a corrosive culture. How has this happened?
Well, over the years, VA is no different from other federal bureaucracies or big agencies. You have tens of thousands of employees, many locations across the country, clinics, service centers, hospitals. And sometimes, again, big government doesn't always do things best. And we've seen the example with Phoenix, and we've seen the example here in Central Florida, and with at least 3 other hospitals under construction, the delays, the cost overruns, and projects not being done right. So whether it's problems in service to our veterans and their care, and we saw some serious abuse cases in Phoenix, or projects to construct public facilities and hospitals, we do have issues. It's part of big federal buruocracy.
Now, you were active in the Veterans Access to Care Act. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, that was part of the spillover from Phoenix, and there we had cases of some of the employees abusing the records and also the veterans, and they were fudging the dates of and the time that it took to get an appointment to qualify, unfortunately, for bonuses and other rewards. Very blatant abuse. And many veterans were delayed service, and again, this cover-up took place. So Congress and the American people were appalled at what took place. So we've had to do a couple of things. One, make certain that we do have the care for veterans, and they don't have a long waiting list. And that act addressed that. It was a pretty expensive act, $16 billion. Part of the act's funding will go to allow a veteran who has to wait or can't be have access to quick service, medical services, which is so important. But part of the act is to provide independent or private services after a certain delay.
And that's not been done before.
Well, on a limited basis, but it is expensive. You have the system. We have problems there, Diane, in the system. It's geared to funding, and it's also geared to paying attention to where veterans have been traditionally. That's in the Rust Belt across the Northeast. Now you have states like Arizona, where we had the problem, Texas, Florida, huge veterans populations. They're aging, they're coming south, they're retiring, and they want the services. But some of the facilities, the hospitals, the clinics, the care facilities, and the money sometimes stay up north. So we have that imbalance. It takes a long time to shift that around. So that's part of the problem, but you have some bad actors. There are thousands of VA nurses and physicians and medical care facility personnel who do a fantastic job. Good people work so hard. I've seen them here at Lake Baldwin. I've seen them in other clinics and hospitals. And then you have a few that are abusive.
Let's talk about Lake Baldwin. You fought to keep that open. Why is that so important?
Well, Lake Nona is coming online. It will have a clinic, a hospital. There's been a progressive opening of the Lake Nona VA medical complex. We've already opened a 120-bed nursing care facility. We've opened a 60-bed domiciliary care unit. We had similar beds up in Lake Baldwin. And Lake Baldwin's park, which is part of the old Naval Training Center, we added a nursing home. We've had domiciliary beds. Well, some of those patients now are being serviced already down there. The question has been, what do you do with Baldwin Park? Now, VA, I wrote the past Secretary Shinseki 2 years ago. I said, we're going to open the new one, and we've got the old one. What are you going to do with it? And make plans. Don't wait till it's open. Well, we've already opened. It's been 9 months or more for the domiciliary and nursing care. And I have vacant beds in Winter Park at Lake Baldwin. So I became somewhat frustrated. I did a one-man sit-in in the VA office till I
heard about that.
answers. But you got to do what you got to do. And then we've gotten commitments. We got commitments both out of the interim secretary. Of course, Shinseki stepped down after Phoenix. And we've had an interim secretary, Sloan Gibson, who committed to keeping it open. Now we've had the permanent secretary
Robert
confirmed.
McDonald, right.
Robert McDonald, yes. And he has come here. He committed to give me an answer as to what they'll do there by the end of the year. So originally they'd had a much longer time frame. But you can only study so much. When I had 25% of the homeless population in Central Florida are veterans. That's estimate
huge.
25% of the homeless in Central Florida are veterans living on the street in their cars under bridges. It's shameful to have 120 nursing beds, 60 domiciliary care units, where they can get longer-term care and some attention. They've got issues of mental health, substance abuse, post-traumatic stress syndrome, but we have those facilities here. So now I'm on a campaign to make certain that we get the services that match the needs, and partnering possibly with the state of Florida, who might be able to run the nursing home, possibly with a private contractor who can help with the domiciliary care. If we can't get the VA personnel there, and that might be a more expensive solution, maybe we can have a contract solution. But whatever it takes, we have needs, let's meet them and fill those empty beds.
Now, the House approved oversight for these projects. Are you satisfied that enough is being done?
Well, somewhat. I think, again, you have a big bureaucracy. They're not good at these big projects, particularly a specialized medical facility like a hospital. I think the process needs to be more streamlined. We provided some better guidelines, but having been in the development business, you have
you know
to,
this. That's right.
Well, you have to have a set of plans that's valid. Here, the VA provided plans, but they had outdated specifications, specs. For example, nuclear medicine. They proposed spaces and for equipment that was not current, and we ended up with 3-foot thick walls, wiring that didn't match. Imagine going in and then demoing that area, rewiring it, the delays that caused. We also had some other problems with some of the subs going broken in the recession, and again, just a host of other issues. thousands and thousands of change orders to which someone has to pay for that. So we need a little bit more stability in that whole acquisition and then the construction process.
Now, do you expect the Lake Nona VA facility, when it opens, to be a new benchmark in care for veterans across the country?
I am telling you that the VA facility here, the new hospital, will be the finest anywhere in the country.
That's good to hear.
We have been delayed. That's the bad news. The good news is we'll have the best equipment in there, whether it's nuclear medicine, advanced care facility, but it is a state of the art, and there's nothing that will compare in the state of Florida or the nation to what we have in Lake Nona, and our veterans deserve that care. I don't know if I ever told you this story, but my brother was a Democrat member of Congress, and he was on the Veterans Committee, and both he and I have been committed. I never served active military as Air Force ROTC in college, but both of us committed because our dad died in a crowded veterans hospital. And so both of us have committed our public service to making certain that other families and veterans don't have to go what we went through and my dad went through. So I've had a personal stake in making certain that Lake Nona gets done. And my brother actually is very responsible. I should say our dad is responsible for the Veterans Hospital in West Palm Beach. You can see it along 95. And this one will be the same thing, a private first class who was not, an officer or anything, but with his death and service, veterans will get 2 hospitals.
Well, you're very proud of that. Yes.
Well, at least their sons helped along the way to make certain it was a reality. So a lot of personal satisfaction in getting that job done, keeping Lake Baldwin open. And I've been up to Orange City, which is in the Central Florida area. We actually moved from a small house in Sanford to Orange City, and now that was not too long ago. We need to double the size of that. We don't have parking. We have, I've gone in there 3 or 4 times in the last 6 months, and unfortunately, parking lot's full. They're parking on the grass. The waiting area is at capacity. So have a commitment. We're going to try in the next year to double that size.
Congressman, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you being here.
Great to be with you.
When we come back, we'll find out how horses are playing a key role in a promising new therapy program for veterans suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. Joining us now is Dr. Minette Monroe, a faculty member in the UCF College of Medicine and a leading researcher on equestrian therapy for veterans. Dr. Monroe, welcome to the show.
Hello, Diane. Thank you for having me.
You have a long history working with horses. You obviously love them. How did that lead to your research and your work with veterans?
It actually was, I learned about a course at Stanford University called Medicine and Horsemanship, where they're using horses to teach nonverbal communication skills to medical students. So I approached Heavenly Hooves, the local therapeutic riding center, about partnering and teaching that course. And it just happened at the time that I came there to speak with Tomasa Sanchez, their CEO, she wanted to start a program working with veterans. And so we started talking, and I started reading the literature a little bit about the research that was available, and found out there was very little being done to actually show what kind of improvements equine therapy was making for veterans with PTSD. And so we started our program from there.
So you started, I think the program was a pilot program, Horses for Heroes.
Yes.
So what is the premise behind? What was the intent for this?
The intent for this is to help veterans with PTSD really learn to cope with a lot of their symptoms. Horses are kind of unique in that they live in a state of hypervigilance. If you've ever been around a horse that hears a loud noise and it startles, well, that's how veterans feel too. When they have PTSD, they're hypervigilant and they're hyper aware of their surroundings. And what the veterans didn't realize when they came to work with the horses is that in order to keep the horse engaged with them, they have to be calm themselves. And so they were learning how to be self-soothing and how to keep their own emotions under control in order to interact with the horses. And we didn't come out and tell them that was what was going to happen to them. They discovered that on their own, and they would go home and they would come back the next day or next week for another session, and they would say, you know, I was able to keep my cool during an argument with my neighbor, or I was able to not let my children aggravate me, and I don't really know why, but you know, being calm around the horses, I think, helps me be calm when I'm not around the horses.
Now, when you're talking PTSD, is post-traumatic stress disorder,
Yes.
once a veteran is diagnosed with this, do they come to you? Is it word of mouth? How does this get in? How do they get involved with your program?
It actually was one particular young man who is actually a student at UCF in the social work program called Lyndon Ortiz, and he doesn't mind me talking about him because he's our hero. He was volunteering to work with the children, the disabled children at the therapeutic riding program, and so when he heard that we were wanting to do a veterans program, he went out and solicited other veterans that he knew. And once they came and they saw what we were doing and they saw how great the program was, the words just spread. I go to Wounded Warriors meetings over at the VA to tell people about what we're doing and to ask more people to participate and get phone calls. So we reach out in the community, and the word has just kind of gotten out about what we're doing.
Talk a little bit more about the horses. When I first read about what you're doing, I've always associated dogs more with the interactive therapeutic approach to things. Why do horses work so well with this?
Well, dogs are wonderful, and they do a great job. And a lot of dogs can go places horses can't go. You can't take your horse on an airplane. You can't take your horse to Walmart. But the thing that's unique about horses, I mentioned earlier, because they kind of live in a state of constant PTSD.
So they're very sensitive? Is that what you're saying?
Very sensitive, very empathetic. They are nonverbal, so they have to rely upon your verbal cues and your emotional state, and they can actually feel it. I don't know if you've ever heard the phrase, horses can smell fear. Well, they can sense fear, they can sense nervousness, they can sense anxiety and agitation. And because dogs want to please, they will sometimes ignore those feelings and just continue to interact with you. Horses say, oh, something's wrong, I'm going to step away from you. So in order for the veterans to keep the horses engaged with them, they have to control their own inner feelings, and they have to be able to work together with the horse. Then there's the stepping outside your comfort zone part of it too. I mean, we know dogs. People are familiar with dogs.
Right.
You're around them. Horses are big. If you've never been around them.
And I could understand. I've never been around a horse.
Oh yeah, they're so different than most people's experience, and so helping these veterans get outside of their comfort zone by interacting with an animal they're not familiar with makes them more comfortable doing things like one veteran I worked with, who was a Vietnam veteran in our first group, had barely left his apartment. Once he started coming out to the therapeutic riding program, then he started taking watercolor classes, and he started going out and working and helping other veterans in homeless shelters. So it's that sort of thing. Once you do something that is something you thought you'd never be able to do, then you just move on. One of our veterans has had his leg amputated at the hip, and he is a beautiful rider. He's on our drill team. He's just really fantastic at what he does. And during the second round of sessions last fall, he said, Doc, you're never going to believe what I'm doing now. And I said, what? And he said, I'm riding a bicycle. And I said, how? You're a one-legged man. How are you riding a bicycle? He said, well, you got me on a horse. Now I can do anything.
So it brings that confidence level. Now you
Yes.
mentioned something I think that's very interesting. I was thinking these are veterans, more recent veterans. You talked about somebody from Vietnam.
Oh, yes.
So do you have a range of ages of anybody that's a veteran?
Anybody who's under 70 and over 18 and is able to get up on a horse. That's the range that we have. So yes, we had Vietnam veterans in our first cohort. And an unexpected bonus from that was the wisdom they were able to give the younger veterans, to talk to them about some of their experiences and how much more difficult it had been when they transitioned back to civilian life compared to what was happening with these veterans now. And to help explain to them that it was going to get better over time and that they were going to reintegrate more fluidly into civilian life once they had been back for a while. So that kind of connection was wonderful.
So gender and age aren't factors at all.
No, or what branch of the service, and even how badly you're injured. We have one young gentleman who is a double amputee above the knee, and he is one of our better riders now.
Now you talked about some examples of the progress that you've witnessed. You were saying that when you first started in, there wasn't a lot of documented research on this. So is that what you are gathering as well from the program that you're doing?
Yes, that's what we're trying to do. It's a little difficult simply because validated research requires big numbers. and we can only work with 8 veterans at a time. And that's what we found is kind of our ideal size of a group. And so obviously in order to get up to 100 or 200 different participants, it's going to take us a while of cycling through all of the different groups in order to be able to have statistically significant numbers. So we're aiming for that now, but our pilot study has already produced some really, really great improvements, and we have documented those. I had an opportunity to present those last year at an international conference on therapeutic riding, and it's a great start for everything. So we just have to keep going until we build up enough numbers to be able to really show that this is true.
There's a lot of factors that go into building the program, though. Is it growing?
Yes, it is. We have a waiting list of participants. And the big thing that we're waiting on that is really exciting is having our own purpose-built therapeutic riding center on Narcoossee Road. And that's going to be unique because there is nothing like this in the United States. We have a major university with a College of Medicine, a well-established therapeutic riding program, and a county all working together to support this endeavor. And I can't say enough great things about Osceola County and the Osceola County Commissioners who are supplying the land and the infrastructure for us to have our own center.
So quite a collaboration. Now, is this public-private partnerships?
This is public and nonprofit. So it's the university, it's the county of Osceola, and it's Heavenly Hooves, the nonprofit Therapeutic Riding Association. And it's no one else is doing this anywhere. This is totally
That's
unique.
amazing. Now, with the initial success that you've achieved with the program, will your research focus change, or are you going to keep moving on so that you get enough background here to maybe apply for some big grants?
Oh, I'm hoping. We're continuing on. We're going to continue to work with this. PTSD is a chronic problem. It doesn't go away, and it's something that we want to be able, once people come into our program, for the veterans to be able to continue working on with us and hopefully coming back and mentoring and working together with other veterans throughout the program. We always want to have an open door where anyone who's been through our program can return and continue to get the help that they need. But we also have already begun a program over the summer working with autistic children. I got some funding from the College of Medicine and have a partnership with the Department of Physical Therapy with Dr. Jennifer Tucker and 2 of her doctoral students. And we all 4 worked together this summer to do a study with physical therapy outcomes for autistic children that are using therapeutic riding.
I wondered about that, if this had the potential, equestrian therapy had the potential to be used with other disorders or populations. So you're already starting that.
We've already started that, and it's already being used for a lot of different populations. One of the very famous people who speaks about therapeutic riding is Ann Romney, and part of the reason that she became involved in dressage and riding her horse is because it helps with her multiple sclerosis. And there's actually been some good research done in that area. There's also been a fairly nice body of research done with the pediatric population that has cerebral palsy, and they've shown some excellent outcomes there. There's a lot of different modalities, a lot of psychotherapy that can be done. Equine therapy is used to help women with eating disorders, with juvenile offenders and helping rehabilitate them. It's used with people who have addiction disorders. It's just really, I always joke and say horses cure everything.
Dr. Monroe, what would you most like to achieve through your work and your research?
What I'd like to really achieve is to let people know what equine therapy can do to help just a whole range of different physical and mental disorders, and to let other physicians and other healthcare providers actually realize that this is a modality of treatment that they may have many patients for which it's appropriate. And so we want to be able to help people understand and help the public and the profession of healthcare understand what equine therapy can do and understand how equine therapy may be a really viable modality for treatment.
Dr. Monroe, thank you for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me, Diane.
That's all the time we have for our show today. I would like to thank all of the veterans who have bravely fought and upheld our freedom. Until next time, I'm Diane Trees.